Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm working on a 2015 Chevy Impala and I'll be putting front brake pads and rotors on. And in this video I'm going to be a little more in depth than maybe I have been in the past doing this same type of job. So if you're somebody who kind of already has an idea of what is going on as far as getting the tire and wheel off, you might want to skip through a little bit, but I just want to be thorough on this so that somebody that's never done this type of a job can do it with no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and start with jacking the car up, and I want to show you where you would want to jack this car up on this particular model. Alright, so I'm going to be using a floor jack, and I want to show where you're going to want to jack the car up. And I might be switching over to my other camera just to make it a little easier for me to show you. You can see where this is where the door stops, and this is the door seal. So we're going to come underneath, and we're looking for this right here. And this is what is called a pinch weld, and this is a lifting point for the cars. So in most cars, when you find something like this underneath, that's a good point to jack the car up. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to find a good place to put a jack stand. Alright, something I did not mention that I should have is if you are going to be using a ratchet or a breaker bar instead of an impact, you're going to want to break the lug nuts loose prior to jacking the front of the car up. I kind of skipped that step just because I do have an impact, and I'm going to go ahead and just break these lug nuts loose and get the lug nuts off, get the wheel off. From here, what we are going to be doing is taking off a bolt that's right here. That's a 13mm, and then a bolt right here, a 13mm. So if these bolts are too tight for you to break loose with a regular ratchet, you can use a breaker bar. I'll put a link, excuse me, I'll put a link in the description below to a 3/8 inch breaker bar. They're really handy to have for just about any job, but I have found that I use them quite a bit on brake jobs. And you'll probably see when I move to the caliper bracket bolts that I'll be doing that. I'll be using that. Alright, so the caliper is loose now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off, set it up here. I'm going to go ahead and compress the caliper, push it back in so that we have room for the new pads. So I have a kit that I use to push the caliper piston back in, and I'll link that also in the description below. And it has these It has these attachments in it. One goes up against the piston, and then you use this to put some pressure on the caliper itself back here, and then once you have tension between the piston and the caliper through this assembly here, you can start to twist this and it just pushes the caliper piston back in. So we're going to push it all the way in. Alright, so it bottomed out, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to put brand new pads in here and have clearance to put back on the new rotor. And really all this is doing, I'll back out so you can see. I'm just using a bungee cord to hang the caliper so there's not a lot of stress on the brake hose. So now we'll focus on getting these two 21 millimeter bolts off and get the caliper bracket off. So I just broke those loose with the breaker bar, and I'm going to see if I can remove them with the ratchet. Alright, so at this point the caliper bracket is loose, and when we pull it off the brake pads are going to come with it, and then we will clean it up and get it ready to go back on, and we'll get the old rotor off, put the new rotor on. One thing to know is if you're working on a car that's not had brakes done in a long time, sometimes these rotors will be rusted to the hub and you can have a very difficult time getting them off. This one I can already tell is kind of loose. I'm not going to have any problems with it, but sometimes I've had to use a 4-pound sledgehammer, go all the way around the hub, and then try and hit it as much as I can from the backside. If that is a problem that you run into, once this is removed, you clear this spot here that you can hit it from, rotate it, hit it, rotate it, hit it, and you just keep working it off there and it'll eventually come. So I'm going to get this old rotor out of the way, get the new one on. Alright, so we are ready to put the new rotor on. In case there's any so now with this piece here, I'm going to take these old brake pads out, just push them in. Got one out. Take the other one, do the same thing, push it in. And we got new hardware with the new brake pads, so we're going to go ahead and remove those. Real easy, push them out. At this point, what I like to do is take a wire brush and just kind of clean up where that hardware is going to go. I'm going to put some grease on the sides, And all you have to do to get them out, as long as they're not seized up, which is why I'm going to put grease on them so they don't seize up, just pull them out just like that. I'm just going to dip a little bit. I'm just going to get just a little bit on there and then reinsert it back in to the hole. I'm going to do the same with this one. Okay, so we're good to go ahead and put the hardware on the caliper bracket now. And this is how that goes. So there's two and they're identical, so you can't put them in the wrong spot, especially with this kit here. You can see there's some tabs right here that will grab on the inside lip here. So push those down in there, make sure they're seated well on these right here. Do the other side. And sometimes these are really difficult to get taken off. On this car, I was fortunate that things have gone pretty smooth, but I'm going to go ahead and put the caliper bracket back on. Alright, so now that the caliper bracket is in place, the hardware is on, we can put the new brake pads on. We're ready to put the caliper back on the caliper bracket. Alright, so at this point we can remove the bungee cord. We can get the wheel back on, jack the car up, get the jack stand out, set it back down, and then we can torque the lug nuts by hand with a breaker bar. Alright, so now that we've got everything back together, before we start the car and start trying to pump the brakes, we're going to want to make sure that the brake fluid is topped off. So Alright, so the final step before taking off and driving is we're going to go ahead and start the car. And while it's running, we're going to go ahead and put our foot on the brake. And the brake should be soft, it should go down a little bit. And all we're doing is we're pushing fluid back through the line that we have pushed into the reservoir. So you can see the pedal goes down kind of far. Come back up, push down again, doesn't go so far, and again, and we're good there. So at this point you can go ahead and take off and drive the car, and everything is back to how it was. If you found this to be helpful at all, give me a thumbs up, and if you are interested in maintenance on your vehicle and just seeing another guy's perspective of how to do it, maybe consider subscribing and turn on the notification bell. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you.